Footage used in this video includes weapon-based violence and blood. Viewer discretion is advised. A few months ago, I found a quote from Plato that I found fascinating, namely, his thoughts on the medium of writing. "It is no true wisdom that you offer your disciples, but only its semblance. For by telling them of many things without teaching them, you will make them seem to know much, while for the most part they know nothing. And as men filled not with wisdom, but with the conceit of wisdom, they will be a burden to their fellows." Suffice to say, this opinion hasn't aged terribly well. Whether it be creative, collegiate, or purely personal, writing has served as a means of escapism and of capturing moments in time, not to mention overcoming the limitations that come from utilizing speech and memory alone. Were it not for writing, I wouldn't even be creating this video to begin with, though whether or not that's a good thing remains for the viewer to decide. But at the same time, I do see some truth in what Plato says here. There is a sense of pride that comes from doing something purely by yourself, without the use of any handicaps or shortcuts. It also differentiates between gaining and retaining knowledge, and simply referring to a definition or statement to be parroted as needed. I imagine many education systems still struggle with this aspect. Most of all, reading this quote brought to mind my experience with Elden Ring. All things considered, my playthrough of Elden Ring started the same way I imagine many others did. I picked the class that had the biggest numbers associated with it, designed the epitome of human anatomy, didn't know what the plot was talking about, and then embarked on my journey to do whatever it was I was supposed to do. Ran down some stairs, ran across a bridge, met a big spider monster and got absolutely obliterated by it, typical Thursday. Got resurrected by a girl and a horse, went through the tutorial cave, definitely didn't lose to the boss in the tutorial cave, obtained a fancy new pose. Went up an elevator, opened another door, learned that I need to listen to the number of the beast some more, and was encouraged to follow the golden trail. And as I would wager was also the case with many others, my attention was instead immediately captured by the menacing individual patrolling the field on horseback. Having been given a sense of strength and pride from defeating the soldier of Godric with such ease, I unsheathed my blade and challenged this new foe, only to get smacked into the dirt within under a minute. In hindsight, my assumption is that this encounter is meant to be a rather painful lesson, that in spite of your prior accomplishments, you'll still be confronted with enemies whose strength and stamina so outweigh your own that taking them on is a fool's errand. I decidedly took the exact opposite away from it. See, Elden Ring was my first step into the world of From Software titles, and as such was my first experience with the Souls-like genre as a whole. I had played games with some similarities in the past, but nothing to this extent. Thus, when I died to the Tree Sentinel, I didn't think, oh, I shouldn't be fighting him yet. I thought, oh, this is what they mean when they say that these games are hard. So I spent the next few days throwing myself at this equestrian watchman, with all of my attempts ending in utter annihilation. My takeaway was a simple one. I just wasn't cut from the same cloth as those who had gone through the Soul's Gauntlet. I lacked the patience, time, and dexterity, and ultimately came to terms with my journey coming to a very early end. We already know the punchline. I was instead meant to just sidestep the Sentinel and explore the rest of Limgrave first. But the damage had already been done psychologically. Even knowing I shouldn't fight him, he felt like an obstacle I needed to overcome, one that would stop me from enjoying the rest of the game if I couldn't. Now, what I've been describing was my first playthrough of Elden Ring from about a year ago. When I found that quote from Plato that resonated with me, I re-downloaded the game and started capturing footage. Naturally, I was a bit sloppy in terms of getting back into the swing of things, to the point that I managed to go several attempts without locking onto my foe. But there was a difference between a year ago and now. Somewhere along the way, I had subconsciously learned to fight the Tree Sentinel in a more effective manner. Granted, more effective and leading to victory are far from synonymous, but the strategies I picked up felt like me genuinely learning more about the game. I did my best Obi-Wan Kenobi impression and tried capturing the high ground. I dismissed trying to be fancy with parries in favor of just defending with the shield, and I prioritized a few safe strikes over one big one. I felt like I was playing Punch-Out, trying to avoid the killing blows of my oversized opponent, while pelting him with smaller jabs when the opportunity came. Eventually, I even started to recognize attack patterns, determining when he'd be more vulnerable, or when I should brace myself for a rushing strike. As my focus changed from getting some B-roll footage to actually trying to prove that my Sisyphean task could be completed, I found myself starting to improve with each and every failed attempt, countless as they were. Then the bell rang for the second round. I still don't know the ins and outs of this airborne assault. I think it doesn't take the shield into account because it's a seismic attack more than a direct blow, and that typically 2 rolls are enough to get out of the way, but it's far from guaranteed. Whatever the circumstance, this attack signals the beginning of the latter half of the bout with the first of the Erdtree Knights, and undoubtedly the more difficult one. Why does this shield attack seem to pierce through your guard? Is the horse winding up for a simple strike or an earthquake, and how do you tell the difference? What's even happening with this part of the combo that seems to ignore my defenses entirely, assuming I can even find where it's coming from? For all of the brainpower that came with having to learn the first half of this deadly dance, each new step left me tripping over my own 2 feet and heading back to the drawing board. In spite of this, I knew that victory was feasible. It had to be to begin with, after all. Non-winnable boss fights aren't subtle about their impossibility, and Elden Ring itself already set such an example with the Grafted Scion. But losing to the Tree Sentinel just brings me back to that little cliffside, letting me collect my bearings and my belongings as I try one more time to take him down. If someone can take on a Lionel in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and win with barely anything to their name, why couldn't I do this? Attempt after attempt. Little improvement after little improvement, my endeavor continued on. I came close, tantalizingly close, so many times, and then just as suddenly, it was over. It took me 5 days, 12 hours, 4 flasks of crimson tears, and the health boost granted from the Crimson Amber Medallion, but I had finally slain my foe. I got a weapon that proved to be a worse option than the sword that prevailed in the heat of battle, a smattering of the local currency, and the fear that I had made Elden Ring even more unapproachable. If the Tree Sentinel wasn't meant to be beaten yet, but I was able to do so, what does that say about the rest of the game? Assuming every boss encounter is beatable with this setup, is it worth trying to level up at all? Who's to say when I have or haven't become too powerful, or not powerful enough to square off against whatever's next in line to become my nemesis? Did I learn how to play Elden Ring more effectively, or had I mastered a strategy against one shadow in the cave, ignorant that practicing that same method in the outside world would only lead to further ignominy and wasted hours? For me, playing Elden Ring is engaging in writing as Plato sees it. I can put in the time to make my character as strong as possible, but then I'm doing less work learning how each boss is fought, giving less value to each victory. I can toil away at each titanic clash for hours, days at a time, trying to pinpoint the intricacies of each attack. But if I'm not meant to do that until some unpredictable later time, it sours the experience of whatever satisfaction it could provide. By accomplishing my goal, I had created a lose-lose situation that made me want to go back to games where my struggles wouldn't be due to my own poor decision-making. In other words, I had done nothing short of tarnishing my time with Elden Ring.